Hey, Earthlings! Welcome to part two of a quick three-part series. It's really about the recent time, when the animal movement has moved from vegetarianism as its main thing to veganism. So veganism as the moral baseline. It's a more recent story than many people think. So part one, we've already done. This is part two. Right, so let's start off with Mark Gold, and we're dropping back into the 1980s, as you can see here. Mark Gold was the national organizer for Compassion in Wolf Farming, CIWF, and then the director for 12 years of Animal Aid. So as you'd expect, his 1988 book, anything really from the 80s, again, not exclusive, but most things from the 80s were vegetarian heavy. The first line, in fact, includes this: the main theme of this book is vegetarianism. In dietary terms, he does ask readers to eliminate flesh from their diet and also eat as little dairy, milk, eggs and cheese as possible. The book includes several recipes, and it's one of those weird things where the recipes seem to be vegan friendly, but they're not marked as such. 7 years on, and we have animal rights here. Now, this came out when Vegan Outreach, the organization, was really taking off and making strides, gearing up in the United States. Although within 5 years, they themselves said they regretted using the vegan word in their title. But animal rights mentions veganism twice. It mentions vegetarianism on 19 pages. Now, Animal Century. Actually, Animal Century is a really good book. I would recommend it. So as the 20th century came to an end and our century began, Mark Gold put out Animal Century. It features veganism. It gets mentioned in 6 pages, while vegetarianism is featured in 20. In fact, Mark includes a chapter on Kathleen Janaway, one of the pioneers of the vegan social movement. If we move to Born to be Wild, now, this is written in 2000, at the beginning of the century, by Viva's founder, Juliet Gellatley, who's the Linda McCartney Award for Animal Welfare winner as well. Now, there are 19 references in the index to vegetarianism. There are none at all to veganism. However, in the text, even though not in the index, in the text, Juliet says to readers, go vegetarian or vegan, which was the messaging really from her organization Viva at the time, the kind of mix and match that I mentioned in part one. Now, Eating from 2006 contains actually more references to veganism than to vegetarianism. Because of the title, it's obviously about the dietary aspects. It's known, this book, for its controversial section in which the authors describe a time, 12 hours in fact, one day, when they worked as turkey inseminators, and they give a very graphic account of what they got up to during that. And the book ends with this. It's a section called Food is an Ethical Issue, but you don't have to be fanatical about it. Now, what this section is essentially saying right at the end of the book is that it's okay every now and again to abandon your vegetarian and vegan principles and just eat, what, presumably who you want. Have the luxury of a non-vegan meal, that kind of stuff. After all, quote, what difference does it make if I eat this food? So it's a very kind of utilitarian thing, as you'd expect with Peter Singer involved. Now, eating animals made quite a splash in the movement when it came out in 2009. Jonathan Safran Foer, he never really presented himself as an animal liberation advocate. In fact, the blurb for the book describes him as an occasional vegetarian. Veganism does get a mention on 8 pages. Vegetarian is mentioned on 44 separate pages. So there's the imbalance there. Foer also includes, this is rather odd, an account from a person who claims to be a vegan and yet designs slaughterhouses. So that's in this book as well. Okay, moving on to academia. This is 1996, when Gary Francione and Anna Charlton was running the Rutgers Animal Clinic, or the Rutgers University Animal Rights Law Center. Now, Francione reports here, this is like a little bulletin. He says that he attended a lecture and then went for dinner with the speaker. And Francione chooses the vegetarian option in the restaurant, and the lecturer chooses the flesh. I think it's called beef in this report. So the lecturer notices that Francione's plate is flesh-free and asks if he's a vegetarian. And Francione responds by saying, being asked about being a vegetarian legitimates at least a polite inquiry about being a non-vegetarian. He says that talking about these issues over dinner is not a great thing, really. So I answered his question. Yes, I am still very much a vegetarian. Now, the significance of pointing this out is this is 1996. Okay. Now, Gary Francione went vegan in 1982 after reading a book, which I've mentioned a few times, by John Bryant called Fettered Kingdoms. So this is 14 years after living vegan, and he's still self-identifying as a vegetarian. So I think the significance here is whether any modern day advocate would do this. At 14 years in, for some tactical reason, presumably, you would call yourself a vegetarian rather than saying that you, in fact, are a vegan. On the left there, you've got Rain Without Thunder, which is a really good book, 1996, the same year as the commentary that we've just talked about. There's no mention of veganism in Rain Without Thunder for all it's worth as a book. To the right is Francione's book, Introduction to Animal Rights, from 2000, again, the beginning of this century. There's no mention of veganism there either. This is 24 years ago. It's taken a long time for the animal movement to move towards veganism as the moral baseline. You know, there's been a lot of reluctance, a lot of pushback to the very idea, which brings me to my favorite author, of course. This is Melanie Joy. This is 2010, 14 years ago. So this is the book that introduced animal advocates to the vegetarian concept of carnism. The box is from the index, part of the index. There's no mention of veganism, but there's several mentions of vegetarianism. Carnism is a vegetarian concept, popular for some unknown reason that I can never fathom in the vegan movement. Now, this is Melanie Joy talking about vegans and describing them as pure vegetarians, which is very misleading. As ever with these publications, there's a lot about the food aspect, the dietary aspect, very little about the philosophy of veganism, which again is really a sad thing to report. She says that she observes that vegans tend to be less disgusted by eggs and dairy than they are about so-called meat. And she comes up with what she imagines to be the reason for that. She says, well, it's possible to obtain eggs and dairy without violence. Now, this is not a very vegan thing to say, and therefore it's less offensive, and therefore it's less disgusting. Now, obviously, from a vegan point of view, vegans do not consume plant-based foods, and they don't avoid flesh-based foods because they're personally offended or disgusted by the food. It's more to do with the fact that we oppose the rights violations. We oppose the fact that our fellow animals are being exploited and persecuted. It's nothing to do with personal feelings of disgust and offense. Okay, so there's your part 2. Part 3 to come, when we finish our little journey into this struggle to prize, crowbar veganism into the animal movement.